Okay, we will just make it rock and hope it works out. Okay, so hi everybody. Hey Eric, how you doing, buddy? So what I'm going to basically go over today is a deck tech for one of my favorite generals for EDH, which is actually Selvala. Selvala Explore Return, the original OG Selvala, which is a really sweet general if you've never had a chance to try it out. Basically, something to be aware of with Selvala is when you parlay, which is the activation here, it actually counts as a mana ability. So when you tap it, it's a mana ability, which gets by a lot of instant speed stacks and effects and things like that. You almost always have a response that you can do, which I think is pretty darn sweet. So that's the Selvala deck. Now, some other people are here because we have a raffle group, and I wanted to kind of clue them in onto how this works. And once we get enough viewers in, let's say 10 viewers, we'll definitely go ahead and start off the raffle. Currently, we have a Gaia's Cradle raffle. There are 20 spots. There's $25 a spot, and I think it's about 6 or 7 are full right now. We will run this by Sunday, or we will terminate it by Sunday. So if you are interested, feel free to get a hold of me through the Facebook group, and we'll definitely get that raffled off. This Scalding Tarn did actually fill, and this one is, again, 20 slots. They were $7 a spot, and it's a beautiful Scalding Tarn from the Master Set. And we have the names and numbers and everything else for that, and that's right here. So we will definitely be running that in just a little bit. But first thing I want to do is get into the deck tech. So a little bit about this deck tech. It's an EDH deck tech. Selvala is the general. The reason I chose Selvala has a utility up the yin-yang. Now, a lot of people have gone on to make this deck, but they've made it going with the infinite mana combo, and they make it into a huge threat. That's not what this Selvala does. This Selvala, I call it Selvala Sneak-A-Win, and it's really about, it's really used for sneaking in your win condition, literally. So we have Feldar Sovereigns you can sneak in. We have enchantments that if you have over 50 life, you can sneak in. There, of course, is various win cons that use your life to help you win, or just a huge amount of mana to help you win. You drawing cards. You can actually do Viceling effects to hurt people with their draw spells. So it's pretty darn sweet. And I really, really like Selvala, and I think you guys will too. It's been competitive for me. It's a Celestia deck that actually competes because it can shut off blue. And it also takes away a lot of stacks effects. So it's really good utility, and I can tell you about that in just a, well, let's begin actually. So Selvala is the general, of course. It's a 2/4 creature. Most of the deck revolves around Selvala being in play and actually working. So if you want to go ahead and you want to be able to protect it, you want to give it haste, you want to do untap on other people's turns, you want to do all that with this deck. Okay, so this is our main card. There's only a few non or basic lands. And I have a whole breakdown of everything, but there's basically 3 forest and 9 plains. All right, we still have other utility lands, and I'll run into those now. Some of the utility lands include Wirewood Lodge, which gives you great utility out of untapping Selvala. Hall of the Bandit Lord, which if you're not familiar with it, gives you actually hasty creatures for only 3 life. And you're going to find that we have a lot of ways to hurt you with life, but we have a lot of ways to gain life. So life doesn't really mean as much in this deck. Scavenger Grounds, another utility card because it exiles problem graveyards. Now, you do have recursion of your own graveyard, but sometimes you just really got to get rid of someone else's graveyard. That's a problem. Besieger, who shelters all, because you want your spells not to be countered. So this is definitely a great auto-include in any deck that runs a lot of instants or sorceries. Strip Mine, again, sometimes there's just problem lands you got to get rid of. Winding Canyons, an old reserve list card a lot of people don't know about. This card actually, for 2 mana, and you're going to have lots of mana in this game, helps you flash this in, or any of your creatures, really, and you can play it on an end step of someone else's turn, and all of a sudden you've got a hasty creature on the next turn. Followed by Ancient Tomb and a Wreck Tower. Now, infinite hand sizes are important in this game, which is why I have, I think, 3 or 4 different ways to make infinite hand sizes. So that's definitely one of them. The rest of the lands that are here are all about mana fixing. So Savannah, Sungrass Prairie, Windswept Heath, Brushland, Scattered Groves, Promenade, Canopy Vista, Spire of Industry, Command Tower, City Brass, Temple Garden, Sun Petal Grove, Riftstore, Portal. This is kind of fun. You toss this in your graveyard, and all of your mana is green or white. Doesn't matter. Horizon Canopy, Wooded Bastion, and Fortified Village. So that's just the lands. And I'm going to have I have a deck tech actually on Tapped Out. I will make sure I link in the channel so everybody can read it in case they want to build this or they just like some of the cards they saw. The least amount of a thing we have is actually sorceries. There's only 4 in here, and you'll see why in a minute, because most of the time you're running instants. That's really where your bread and butter is. But one of the sorceries is a Retribution of the Meek. This is another older reserve list card. Let me get this in here so it can focus. There we go. Retribution of the Meek says, destroy all creatures with power 4 or greater. You're never going to really have to worry about creatures being too big. And this is great utility when you want to go ahead and just board wipe and get rid of problems on the board. Another one, All is Dust. Yeah, it might catch a couple of your things, but it's very likely it'll catch most of their things. And a lot of your important assets are either instants or artifacts. So really, this doesn't affect you too badly. Praetor's Council. I told you we have a few ways to recur your graveyard. This is definitely one of them. Praetor's Council is an often overlooked card, but basically what it says is it's a sorcery. It does cost a lot. It's 8 green, but again, you're going to see that you can catch a lot of mana in this deck. You will see that you can return all of the cards from your graveyard to your hand. So everything that you've littered in there, you basically get to do it again, and you have an infinite hand size. Like I said, infinite hand size is important in this deck. And Approach of the Second Sun. This is our first win con. You're not going to win with general damage in this deck. You're going to win with stuff like this. If you're not familiar with this card, it came out in the Amonkhet days. And Approach of the Second Sun basically says, when you cast this a second time, you win the game. Now think about that for just a second. In a deck where Selvala is key, Selvala being tap, draw, tap, draw, tap, draw, you can pretty much get this off very quickly. Now, you're going to want to make sure you have a Grand Arbiter or a Conqueror's Flail out, so that way they're not interrupting your casting, but it's very easy to win with this card in this deck. This is probably the easiest way, in fact, other than sneaking in a Feldar Sovereign. So that's one of the win cons. Oh, another sorcery is an untap all creatures, which really you only care about Selvala. As for creatures, there's only a handful in here, and I'll show you. Most of them do great utility. So Viceling. Viceling is a creature that basically your opponents take damage on their upkeep based on their hand size. And when this camera decides to focus, you will be able to read that all for yourself. Oh, yeah, there we go. So it has to be 1 inch away for you to read the card. Awesome. That's a good camera. So yeah, that's the Viceling right there. It costs 4, and it's excellent because it powers in with a lot of the other artifacts in this deck that do exactly the same thing. Followed by a Psychosis Crawler. Well, you know, sometimes you just got to do a little bit of damage. And when you're drawing cards, you're doing damage to people. So this is just a fun creature to have in there. Not to mention, when you have an infinite hand size, it can get pretty darn big. Feldar Sovereign, our second win condition. This is an instant win condition. You sneak it in with a Winding Canyon or some other means. You have this on your upkeep. You have more than 40 life, which is very likely you will have more than 40 life in this game. You win. Shimmermere. It is great utility to be able to flash in your artifacts, and this is one of the ways to do it. Seedborn Muse, for obvious reasons. Untapping and getting extra taps is amazing. A little mana fixing. Grand Abolisher. This is White's answer and White and Green's answer to counterspells. Basically, you want to be playing these type of effects in any of your white or green decks, or any deck that's not running blue and is afraid of counter magic. These type of effects are what saves you the game. And Seeker of the Skybreak, which is another untapped creature. So those are the creatures for this deck. Let me run into the enchantments and another small group. Huge utility out of this. And honestly, if a round goes where this is not answered, you pretty much have a game win. Smothering Tithe, everyone's favorite card. Basically, it's the answer to Rhystic Study. It creates a shitload of mana for you. And surprise, surprise, as you're drawing a lot of cards and everyone's drawing a lot of cards, it's not uncommon to have 40, 50, 60 of these counters out if it goes unresolved. So definitely consider a Smothering Tithe. Awakening. Now, this is kind of a controversial choice, and I love it. Awakening is a Seedborn Muse for everything, for all your creatures, for all your lands, everyone, as in all the players. They all get this. And why we don't want to lock down the deck, first of all, it's an anti-stacks deck. We don't necessarily want to lock down the deck. We want people drawing cards. We want people having answers and spells, just not for the stuff you're casting. Remember, you're going to protect your stuff, but you want counter magic available for other players because you're a green-white deck. You can't answer everything, but you can unlock other people to answer things for them. So Awakening, great utility. Wilderness Reclamation, another way to basically untap your stuff on your end step. Great value because just one more trigger of untapping Selvala can be a game-winning move for you. Test of Endurance, game win con number 3 or 4 now. This is basically Feldar Sovereign, a little bit higher at 50 life, and it's on an enchantment, not a creature. So another, if you can flash this in, and we have ways to do that in this deck, on your upkeep you win if you have more than 50 life. Sylvan Library, more drawing effects. Nature's Chosen, more untap effects. You get to untap a creature once per turn on your turn. Great utility. It actually is a cousin to Instill Energy, which gives you pseudo haste and a free untap. Huge ability. Song of the Dryads, one of the best answers in green. You can put it onto a planeswalker. You can put it onto a creature. You can put it onto a general, onto a land, anything. Turns it into a basic land with no abilities. Quest for Renewal. Another way to get more untaps. Basically, how this card works is when you tap a creature, you put a counter on there. If you have 4 counters on there, you get basically a Seedborn Muse type effect. And it's very easy to do to get Selvala active 4 times or more in a single turn. All right, so those are the enchantments. Now on to the last 2 piles. We have artifacts and instants. For artifacts, I'm going to start with some pain right here. Iron Maiden, you may remember the guy who does damage based on hand size. Well, guess what? We have another one that does it based on your hand size. And again, this is, so the Viceling, this is akin to the Viceling. People should have 10, 15, 20 cards in their hand, so they're going to be taking huge damage on their upkeep, and it doesn't affect you. Soul Ring for mana fixing, Temple Bell for drawing those cards, Paradox Engine because, are you kidding me? Utility, utility, value, value, value. With a Paradox and a Selvala out, it's pretty much game because you're going to have enough things to cast to unlock them. Black Vice, basically the third Viceling effect, Iron Maiden, Viceling, and Black Vice. Although Viceling or Black Vice is a little bit more selective because you actually choose a single player and you basically nudge them down. Another win con is basically just kill your opponents. I have had games where I've had over 160 life easily. And then this bad boy comes out and I go, all right, who wants to die first? If you're not familiar with Aetherflux Reservoir, basically when you cast a spell, you gain a life for each spell you cast before. And if you have 50 life to spare, you can sacrifice 50 life and shoot a player for 50 life, or a creature if you need to, but usually you go after a player. So if your life is upwards in the hundreds or so, this is a gun you got at anyone's head. You can activate anytime you need to. Conqueror's Flail. Just like Grand Abolisher, this shuts off responses. This is what you want to have in play before you decide you want to win. So make sure you get a Conqueror's Flail. It honestly belongs in every deck if you're not running blue and you don't have answers for counter magic. Swiftfoot Boots, just protection for your general and swift haste. Anvil of Bogadon. Basically, this is an old reserve list card. Let me get in kind of close and get my shitty camera working. This is a real fun old school card. It basically gives everyone an infinite hand size. You don't have your normal draw. You basically draw 2 cards and you pitch one of them, and then you don't have a discard phase. Super, super value in this deck where a lot of times I hurt people based on their hand size. Umbral Mantle. This oftentimes can get you not infinite mana, but it can get you a lot of mana. Remember, you're always paying 3, and Selvala always has the condition that if you reveal a land, you don't get mana for it. So you definitely don't have infinite mana, but this can be key to getting enough mana to win. Puzzle Box, because we all love a little bit of chaos. Puzzle Box is awesome. And you don't really care what's in your hand because you're constantly filling it and refilling it, and you're going to see those cards again anyway. So this throws a lot of players off their game and is a highly, highly instrumental way to basically just mess with the table a little bit. But it doesn't affect everybody equally. So usually the players that like it will protect it, and that's kind of nice. Videlkin Ori. This is such an underutilized card. This literally gives everything in your hand flash. Everything. Except for lands. So you can cast any sorcery at instant speed. You can cast any artifact or creature or enchantment at instant speed. I don't know why people aren't playing this more. It's huge utility. Great, great card. Chromatic Lantern, mana fixing, obviously. 1,000-Year Elixir, great way to get some untaps and hasty untaps out of your creature. Thought Vessel, the third way to get an infinite hand size in this deck. And the Archive. This is specifically made for this type of deck. Basically, when you gain life, you double the life you gain. When you draw a card, you double the draws you get. If this is allowed to stay in the this is almost as bad as Paradox Engine. This is ridiculous value. So now we have our instance, and that will be that deck text. So let me show you our instance. Our first one is our one and only tutor. It is an Enlightened Tutor, of course, to get out any artifact or enchantment. A little bit of protection. Of course, the #1 white protection spell, Teferi Protection. If you just need to get the hell out of dodge, that's one way to do it. And a nice little trick to be aware of. You can cast Feldar Sovereign. You can go ahead and then, if it resolves, you can instant speed due to Teferi's Protection, say if somebody wants to remove Feldar Sovereign. You phase back in, on your upkeep, you win the game. Feldar Sovereign is in play. So it gives them a whole turn to tell them to F off, basically, a whole round. Join shields, basically like Heroic Intervention, just 2 ways to give yourself indestructible and hexproof. One costs a little bit more, one happens to untap your creatures, but in any deck that has green, Heroic Intervention should be a part of it, and join shields, because I have so much darn mana in this deck, it's a good way to go. So now on to the ways to control players. There's several ways to do it in white, and I'm going to reveal them to you now. The first one is Abeyance, which is basically a way to shut off a target player's sorceries or instants for a turn, and it gives you a draw. Great utility for 2 as an instant speed. Then we have Orm's Chant. Does almost exactly the same thing. A target player cannot play spells, and if you paid the kicker, which is an extra one, they can't attack either. You basically shut them down for the turn. And then finally, everyone's favorite, Silence. This shuts down the board. If you resolve a Silence, you're usually winning that game, and you're usually winning on that turn. Okay. And finally, my pet card. Now, this does not always win you the game, but it's fun utility, and it's great in competitive when people are going for the Lab Maniac win. It says, Angel's Grace, you do not lose. More importantly, split second. It is not counterable. Think about that for a second. For 1 white, you have an uncounterable spell that says you cannot lose. You get 1 more turn, basically. It keeps your life at 1, and you can't lose the game. So somebody says they're going to go all infinite, and they're going to remove their entire deck, and they're going to go for the Lab Maniac win, right? You flash this bad boy in, and now they don't win. And now you have a turn to resolve and respond to them. And maybe you can get rid of their Lab Man, and then they have to go to a draw step, and they die. Yeah, it's happened before in a competitive tournament. Super fun card. I love it to death. Seed Time. Green's answer to blue. Basically, people will try to counter your stuff, and when they do, and they cast a blue spell, why don't you take an extra turn? No one sees this coming, and in your playing EDH, there's almost always a blue player. Great fun, great utility. Constant Miss. Sometimes the attacking gets a little crazy, and you need to go ahead and back them off a little bit. So Constant Miss is a great way to do it. And then we have some untapped mechanics. These are very easy. Savage Surge, Ornamental Courage, Vitalize, Vines of the Recluse, Emerald Charm, Benefactor's Drought, just to give you a few. Now, Stormseeker. This is the only mono green card that does direct damage that I'm aware of in the world of Magic. It's an old-ass card. I do not ever see it getting reprinted because of its ability that is just not in line with what green does. But it basically says it does exactly what the Viceling effects do earlier that I showed you. Deal 1 damage to a player. Do 1 damage to a player based on their hand size. So let's say they've been taking Viceling damage and they're down to 6 or 7 and they happen to have 10 cards in their hand. You just murdered them. It's pretty sweet. Squall Line, the exact same thing, except it does it to everybody, including yourself. So this is going to do direct damage to all flying creatures and all players, but it's very likely you're going to have a much higher life total than everybody else. So this is just a way to either drop them down or to win the game at instant speed. Oblation. Sometimes you got to get rid of permanents, and that's one way to do it. Sylvan Reclamation, a way to exile artifacts or enchantments. Or if you just need some utility, you can use it for its basic land cycling. Fracturing Gust. Not only does it give you get rid of all artifacts and enchantments that may be bugging you, but it also gives you 2 life each time you do. And it's at instant speed. It's freaking nuts. In fact, it's so nuts. It goes. It's one of my favorite cards, and a lot of people don't realize this even exists. Swords to Plowshare when you need to exile stuff. Path to Exile. This is in every deck that has white. Gross and Grip for the same reasoning. And finally, Beast Within when you got to take care of problems. So that's kind of the deck Selvala. Selvala Explorer returned. I absolutely love it. It's a low-key deck. There's not a lot of people that think, oh, goodness, I got to get rid of this general right away. It's not like an Arkham or a Prosh or a Zur or Teferi or any of those bad boys that if they're out, they win on turn 1. It's nothing like that. But it is utility. And a lot of people actually will protect it because it helps draw them cards. So that's just something fun I wanted to show you all. Like I said, I do have a tapped out link I will be posting in just a few minutes. And now let's get to the reason most of you actually showed up for, and that is the Scalding Tarn raffle. So what we have right here is a deck box. What we have right here is a Scalding Tarn. This has been purchased. It will be raffled off. Here's from the direct Facebook group. And here's the list of names from Steven at number 1 all the way down to Phoenix at number 20. Okay, so I will put this die in here like that. A number will come up. It happens to be 1. That one, this of course doesn't count. I'm just doing demonstration. If the number comes up, I go ahead and mark it off. To be considered a winner, you must have your number crossed off twice. So in other words, your number has to come up 2 separate times for you to be the winner of this raffle. Sound good? Excellent. So without any further ado, we've got viewers. We're on a live stream. Let's check this out. I'll tell you what, I'm going to do a couple more practice rolls just to show you this is not a loaded dice in any way. So these ones are just practice rolls, okay? Practice only. So the first one was 1. This is 12. And one more, 11. Okay, so we're using a dice tower. Hands are off. I've shown 1, 12, and 11, all different numbers. Let's begin with the official numbering right now. Best of luck to everyone who played. Thanks for joining us in the raffles. Here we go. First number is 2. I'm going to mark off number 2, which is Geo. Number 2, or the second roll. 12. Second number is 12. There's Eric, who I know is excited for Glee right now. All right, good luck. Jesus Christ, Eric. You wouldn't believe it, but yep, Eric just got himself a Scalding Tarn. Now I'm waiting to hear him go completely apeshit. All right, congratulations to you, Eric. You got yourself a Scalding Tarn. Welcome to the party. Number 12 was lucky for you. You called it. Okay. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great day. Feel free to join us at Basement Raffles on Facebook. So it's the Facebook group/Basement Raffles. We've got Discord. We've got this YouTube channel. All the links are there for you guys to find. Thank you very much for watching. Have a wonderful day. Take care. Bye-bye.